What one of the things we've started doing here with auditions, and I remember when it happened, it was a audition for second violin, and we had 2 candidates, and we had the option of a chamber music round, and it actually switched the committee's position around.
Mm-hmm.
And since that time, we've pretty much done chamber music for most every position.
Mm-hmm.
Is that helpful to you? Is it helpful in terms of what you hear or what you get back reported from the people playing, or both?
Well, when we do the chamber music round, I like to sit on stage and be very nearby. And having played chamber music myself and accompanied a lot as a pianist, I know that it's a different vibrations going on at that point. And I remember just a couple of weeks ago, it was amazing because we had dismissed a player from the final rounds, and then I suggested, and that again was a good sign of how easy we relate to each other. I said, guys, would it be completely out of the question if we ask this person to come back? And you said yes, and it changed our opinion completely.
We actually had to call them up because they'd gone back
they had
to
already
the hotel.
gone to the hotel.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I think in chamber music I see so much more in terms of leadership qualities, you know, eye contact, body language, ability to be flexible when you do quartet or quintet, that you normally prepare before that round and you have a certain idea about the tempo. And so I can immediately tell that this player came with a different concept and either is rigid about it and not able to fit in, or is flexible enough about it to inspire you with his or her ideas, yet smoothly fit into what you think about the piece. And that's a lot of what a conductor has to do at work. So these chamber music rounds are extremely helpful for me, and then later talking with the members of the quartet or quintet,
right.
which are not always the same that are members of the audition committee, that
right.
also helps a lot to hear what they have to say.
I would imagine also that hearing that sound in the context of other sounds that you know. I mean, you know how Frank, our concertmaster, sounds and what I sound like.
Mm-hmm.
So when you hear a cellist in that context, it gives you a little more sense of what they really... Because sometimes on stage, even if you're sitting on the stage, much less in our hall, it's very hard to really make that judgment.
Yeah.
How are they going to fit with everybody else?
Yeah, and it becomes as much, if not more, an issue with wind players.
Oh, yeah.
When we hire a wind player, we do excerpts with the wind section. Because if you have something like, let's say, the opening of the slow movement of Brahms 4, or any given, which is not a solo, but with a section really has to go, where the 2 bassoons and the 2 clarinets have to sound like one instrument when they play a 4-part harmony. Extremely important for me to know that this player's style, embouchure, and instrument, the physical instrument, fits in well. And sometimes we had situations where we said, this is the player we want, but we would like to talk about that player about change of equipment, which has happened. I remember with the horns that has happened.
Right.
We hired a fabulous horn player, but we had to ask her to change equipment, which she was willing to, and now she fits beautifully into our section.
I remember a second oboe audition, which I actually heard as union representative, and it was second oboe,
Mm-hmm.
but part of the audition was the whole wind section was there playing one of the Mozart octets,
Mm-hmm.
and a long stretch of it was maybe the whole scherzo minuet movement,
C minor, yeah.
with several candidates. I mean, it took a long time, but it was actually very revealing.
Yep.
It was very revealing, even to a violist, much less to the people on the committee.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk a little bit and pretty much end our talk today with, because this is part of Polyphonic's spotlight on the MSO, just talking about the MSO in particular and what makes it different to the extent it is different, and you know how you feel that you and us have evolved as part of that relationship, and kind of what you hope to leave behind.
The sound of the Milwaukee Symphony I liked and loved from the beginning on. You remember I came to guest conduct a few years before I was...
We did Schubert-Renish, I remember.
Schumann-Renish, exactly.
Schumann-Renish, right. Yeah, sorry.
And it was a quality that reminded me of the Pittsburgh Symphony, where I had spent many years before, which is commonly labeled as a Germanic sound quality, which basically means that Brahms and Beethoven and Schumann and Schubert and Bruckner and Mahler has an inherent sound quality. The mix of strings and winds, and specifically the string sound, has the right kind of dark glow to it, virtuosity and brilliance, but a shining copper kind of color. It's very hard to describe in specific words. It's a specific sound that these pieces require, that you can work for years and not achieve it if it's not somehow inherent. I know in Pittsburgh it was clearly the many years that they worked with William Steinberg.
Right.
And I think here in Milwaukee, it's hard for me, you tell me whether it was Kenneth Schermerhorn or whether it was, I always felt that the need in Milwaukee, having a rather Germanic population structure, you could always give them a lot of Brahms and Beethoven and Schubert and Bruckner, and it was always appreciated very much. So I think it was maybe simply playing a lot of Germanic repertory with this orchestra that made it perfect. And it was always an orchestra that I wanted, because that is a repertory I like the most, and I know we would relate on it. And the piece that I then did as a music director candidate was Brahms 3.
That's right.
And I remember that very strongly, because I think when we do Brahms together, it brings the best out in both of us, both in the orchestra and in the conductor, and it's always wonderful. But what I wanted to achieve then and shape a little bit was, as I said before, there were a couple of important personnel decisions to make, and collaboratively I think we made decisions that really raised the bar and raised the level of this orchestra quite a bit. We have some outstanding musicians in the orchestra. We always had some that had been here before, but I think the new acquisitions, as it were, generally raised the bar in this orchestra.
Who actually, I should point out, somewhat unusually are not all people out of school. I mean, Todd Levy, for example, came here. Todd was well into his career. I mean, there have been some younger players, but it's been an interesting mix.
Yeah, Todd is a very interesting case, and I know he won't mind talking about it because we had talked about it openly. I had known Todd through school because we went to Juilliard together, and I know exactly who he was and what he was. And his audition, he won it hands down, but another candidate also came up very high, so they both played a week with us. And when then that came to that decision, it was not as unanimous as I thought it would be. There were people who thought the other candidate was better. And I mean, it was not dramatic, it was kind of 50-50, but I put my foot down. And boy, did Todd make a difference in this orchestra in the long run.
He's made an impact.
But there are other